Welcome to the Pilosopo podcast. I'm your host, the head Pilosopo. My name is Jiggy Jr. And today our guest is a longtime media man and general manager of Alta Vista Golf and Country Club. Full disclosure, he's my frat mate in Tao Society, and he's also a dear friend, Nimrod Quiñones.
Hello. Hi, Jigs. We've been talking about this since way back the pre-pandemic days.
Exactly, yeah.
And now we're here.
Yes, we have been trying to talk to each other on a podcast, and I wanted us to talk about the traditional old media and the new media. Now, Nimrod, you have been lucky enough to be part of both. Before I ask you to make the distinction, I want you to tell us what is your media experience, Sir Nimrod Quiñones, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I started in 1989 as an intern for both the Freeman and I was assigned then at DYSS. But during that time, DYSS was only doing personality shows on radio. So when we reported there, we were told, oh, you go to GMA 7. So instead of doing DYSS, I was an intern for both the Freeman and GMA 7. So eventually I got hired by both outfits as a student. And so I took it from there. So spent a very long time in media, although I officially left the Freeman in 2012 as my last position was as managing editor. I've continued to stay with media. I have a show on my TV, which is Full Point, the Cebu Sports Show, because I've been with sports media for the longest time. Then for the past couple of years, I'm also editing a local daily based in Dumaguete City. It's called Island News. And I'm doing writing for a lot of friends, helping Inquirer Golf, Tribune Golf, if they need articles from Cebu, because the editors are my good friends. Sometimes I get call-ups from friends editing magazines. I think they like calling me up because I don't demand payment. But that basically summarizes my media story. I spent like 6 years with GMA 7 Cebu, and that's actually, that was during the time when the local news was in English. And I used to do the reports that we were feeding to Manila from Cebu. So that's it.
Nimrod, one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you, because like I said, you have this vast experience in both the old traditional media and the new media now, which of course is a totally different ball game. What is the difference, you think? Because I know you were also a field reporter, right? Aside from a news anchor, I've seen you report on television stories on the field. What is the difference between the way you covered news back then of an event, maybe perhaps of a sporting event, or maybe of a political or a societal event that's happening in your neck of the woods, in your locale, versus the way we cover it these days in the year 2020, or these days in the past 5-10 years?
Well, ages ago, because that's 3 decades ago, we would go out. I'd go out with my cameraman, get the news, write the news, and then we edit it. I do the voiceover. My cameraman would just edit the video. Then we come up with a news story about 3 to 5 minutes long, depending on how big the story was. And it was quite tedious. The process was tedious. If you like to do live, it was impossible for us in the local channels, in the local station here in Cebu, unless we get support from Manila. So like in the 1992 election coverage, we did a microwave link. Right now, probably if you talk of microwave, you just think of that thingy in your kitchen where you put in the popcorn, and after a few minutes, you got popcorn or warm your food. But during the time, it was a microwave link, and we were doing the reporting to Manila, and we even had to do it at the PLDT office along Jones Avenue, that's Osmeña Boulevard. And there was like a delay when you would talk. There's a 2 second delay. So if you're not used to it, you kind of get disoriented when you report, and then the audio comes back like 2 seconds after. So the first time I did it, I was lost. I was with architect Melva Hava, who was then our anchor also, our news anchor, and we also had during those times Bobby Amor was our anchor in GMA7. So it wasn't that fast. Reporting, you cannot do live reporting. Only radio people were doing live reporting. But now, everybody does live. I mean, everybody can do Zoom. Everybody can do Facebook Live. Everybody, even the non-media people who like to pretend they're media, they can do any reporting. So that's the biggest difference from then and now.
In terms of effort, in terms of time allocation for a story, how long would it take for you to, let's say, after you've already done the camera work, after you've already shot the footages of the news of the day, you have to write the story yourself, right? How long is that process back then?
For me, I was quite fast. Sometimes before I get to the office, I already have the story in my mind. So when I sit down, it takes me only like a few minutes to write a story, especially for broadcast. And you just have to have good note-taking skills. And of course, you should always use your head. When you go out on a coverage, you should know how to angle your story. You should know a lot of things. I think my biggest advantage during that time was I went to school. I took up Bachelor of Communication Arts, and I got good training from very good teachers. So I had Attorney Chiking Shares, that's my teacher in news writing and news editing. I had Madame Jeannie Vamenta, who was my teacher in broadcasting and broadcast speech and performance. Then I had for production Madame Flor de Lis Abanto, and a few others. I had pretty good teachers. Then I also was under some legends in Cebu media during that time. In GMA7, there was Mario Trinidad, who was our news director. And then we also had my sports editor then was Glenn Basubas in the Freeman. And of course, our editor-in-chief was the legendary Mr. Juanito Habat. So I had good mentors when I was starting with media. So it wasn't that hard for me to really figure out how to do the job.
Of course, that was what was happening here in Cebu, in your newspaper, which was the Freeman, in your TV station, which was GMA, which you did news anchor and field reporting. But the environment at that time, all over the country, all over the world, was a totally and completely different world back then, right? To where we are now. Maybe you can give us a description, Tol, of the way media was, not just in Cebu, but in the entire Philippines, because the media giants back then, and still is now, were GMA and ABS-CBN, right? But the way we covered the story, how did they cover stories back then? The national media outfits, the giants, especially when it comes to big news.
It was kind of difficult to get information during that time. You had to use a rotary dial phone if you have to call somebody. Then if you're out of town, you have to do a press call collect, because it's the cheapest way to contact your station or your news desk. So you do a press call collect, and then you have somebody like, if a reporter is out of town, they'll dictate to you the story, and then somebody's on the other line bring that huge phone, and then you have to write it down or type it down. I hope our kids still know what typewriters are. You have to type it down, and then sometimes you kind of don't understand what the other person is talking. So, or sometimes that person doesn't even know how to pronounce a particular word, that the spellings come up different. So you have to ask them, can you please spell it out for me? And it turns out it's a word that's really something else. Like, this is a true story. This happened in Cebu Country Club in one of the professional golf tournaments that was held in Cebu. So this writer from Manila, he was on the phone. He was very loud. He's calling his news desk. So, sige, bato ko na story ko. Sige, I think the guy on the other end was ready to receive the story, and then he said, the picture ski. So we were all listening to him, and then suddenly, probably the guy on the other said, "What's picture ski?" So when he spelled it out, it was picturesque. So
Picture ski.
yeah, those things happened. Of course, one of my most memorable coverages of an international event was during the Johnny Walker Classic. This was in 1995, and laptops then were like really expensive. So I didn't have a laptop. I didn't bring a portable typewriter or anything because I was thinking, oh, this is an international event and we'll probably have a media center that would provide everything. So when I got to Orchard Golf and Country Club in Cavite, I was given a media pass by my friends from Johnny Walker. So when I went to the media center, what I saw was just a desk with a phone line and nothing else. So I had to figure out how to write my story. So on the first day, I went to it was a British guy who was in charge of the media center. So I asked for several pieces of bond paper. So I had to write down my story in longhand. It was the third round of the Johnny Walker Classic because I arrived on the third day of the tournament. And I had to write it down. I think it was 6 pages long. And then I had to go to them to ask them to fax it because we already had a fax machine by then, to fax it to the Freeman in Cebu. Yeah. Okay. So this British guy, when he saw what I was doing, it was written down. I told him, at least we have a fax machine. I didn't have to dictate this to the person on the other end. So he just laughed. So after that, I had to ask my family to buy me a laptop because I could not stand going on a coverage without anything to use. And it was kind of embarrassing. I just had to laugh at the situation during that time. And this was 1995.
The way we covered news was we went to the place, we took footages, and we wrote about it, and then we sort of broadcast it on television or telecast it on television or broadcast it on radio, and wrote it for a newspaper the day after. How is it different now? Because there are several storylines, narratives that were big news and were matters of fact then, back in the 80s and even the 90s. But now, some people are trying to sort of revise. There are certain things that we knew back then. You know, for example, I don't want to get political here, but we need to, because these are stories that were happening back in the 80s. You know, the EDSA revolution. You know, the way the Ferdinand Marcos was overthrown after 20 years of his presidency. Would you be able to tell us how media was back then and the way they covered that very divisive, very politically charged news, like the presidency of Ferdinand Marcos and the revolution that ensued? How did we, media, back then, back in the 80s, cover that news?
Well, I wasn't in media back then. I was a freshman in college when that happened. I was 16 years old. I was very politicized. I came from UP High School, just like you. So, well, I was actually part of this group of students that marched around the different campuses and went to Camp Sari Osmeña, on Osmeña Boulevard, to be with the troops there who were waiting to, switch allegiance. And then my friend, a good friend, who just recently retired from ABS-CBN, Junrei Nadella, if you remember the name, Junrei, but he calls it himself Junrei.
Junrei Nadella.
Yeah, he was then with Bombo Radio. He was covering it, so he was interviewing the people around. That was actually my first media interview. I was a student, so it's kind of exciting. But then the people then they had to go to the scene. They had to talk to the people. They had to get the insight of the people right where the action is. But now you can just call anybody on the cell phone. You can ask them, oh, what's the situation there? Can you explain it to me? Can you give me a rundown of what's happening? Can you take pictures? Can you show me a video? Or can we do a video call? So during that time, it was very different. You had to be at the scene. Can you imagine what the photographers were doing, especially those who were going out of town? Like during the 1999, I think it was 1990 or 1991 flooding in Ormoc. So we sent a team, both GMA, the Free, all Cebu media outfits sent teams there. So the photographers would take shots, take pictures, and then send the film back to Cebu. And then the film, when we got it here, we would develop it in our darkroom and then choose from the pictures that they would send us. Sometimes the photographers, I was working closely then with another living legend in Cebu media, Tony Dispojo, who is now with Capital. He would bring the developing chemicals. So he would develop the pictures, and then he would take a look at his negatives, and then write notes. This is frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, and so on. So when we got it, we just have to look look at his notes and then pick the pictures that we would like to use for the paper. So we'd go to the darkroom, print the pictures, and then do the layout. So it was very tedious. In fact, even
in terms of credibility, how trustworthy, in terms of perception of credibility, who do you think, or what do you think was the level of credibility of the major news outfits, the major media outfits back then? Were they this trusted news outfit that everybody believed in? And was there reason for them to trust that media outfit, or was there like a level of distrust for these media outfits back then?
Okay, this is an anecdote from my childhood. If you look at your watch, my mom would ask me, what time is it? Oh, it's 3 o'clock. She said, no, what is the radio time? Because whatever the people say in radio was like gospel truth. If the radio people says it's 3:25, and even if it says 3:15 in your watch is late. Something like that. So during the time, the credibility of the media was quite high. Well, number one is doing fact checking was not that easy. So unlike now, information is at the tip of your fingertips. You can easily fact check. You can easily point out mistakes done by media. Second is the sources were hard to come by. So when you're able to talk to a source, sometimes because of the delay also in the reporting, because of the printing of the paper, because you cannot do live coverage on television, so it takes like a day or two before they could react to something that went wrong. So people thought that during that time, the media was really something you could trust. So you buy the papers and you probably think that while there are people, there are always skeptics, but then they will think, oh, this is gospel truth. This is the media. This is the newspaper.
Was there a reason for this trust for media back then? Did the media outfits give the people a credible news, or was it just because they had no choice but to believe the news, whether it was credible or not?
The second part, the last thing you said is correct, because it was your only source. It was your only source. You cannot log on to any website. Nobody knew of the internet then to check. There's no Snopes. There was nothing that you could use to check whether that was true, unless of course you have personal knowledge of that particular incident. So
is it possible, Nimrod, that there were several things that happened back then, back in the 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s, when traditional media was still, a major player in the landscape. Would you think it is possible that we got some of the major earth-shattering historical events of our nation wrong?
I don't really think so, because media, especially the traditional media, and I would say that traditional media continues to be a very major player now. Um, it is the responsibility of the media people to report the truth. So especially earth-shaking news, very big stories, you cannot just come up with an angle that is done by the spin doctors, where you try to soften the impact of something. During the time, it was kind of difficult. PR practitioners were not doing as much as the PR practitioners are doing now. And then also during the time, there was a lot of competition among the mainstream media. So you cannot mess up. You were all running after the same advertisers. You're running after the same sources. So you just have to make sure that you're fast enough. You're credible enough for these people to trust you, that they give you the scoop. During the times, scoop was king. If you got a scoop, you're great.
So, because one of the reasons why I asked that question is because there's so many people now that are trying to revise history. There are several people now out there. I'm sure you're aware of this, especially if you watch Facebook, that they're trying to revise whatever happened to us back in that time, and they're trying to dispute what happened back then. And one of the biggest issues now is for example, the assassination of Benigno Aquino Jr. There's so many conspiracy theories. There's so many different versions. Why did Cory Aquino and Pinoy not solve the mystery of their families, Nino Aquino's death and all that stuff? And they're even trying to rename the Nino Aquino International Airport to something else. And that's not just happening. That's not just happening here in the Philippines. In the United States, you can see that they're destroying, they're tearing down their monuments there of Confederate leaders because of the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States. So it's not just here locally in the Philippines. People are trying to revise the way they look at the past, or are they trying to update what we knew was true back then to what is true now? What's going on now, Nimrod, with all of these revisionists and all these fake news and all these conspiracy theories that's being thrown around? What's going on now, Nimrod, in 2020? What's going on?
Well, I think this is more of a social issue rather than a media issue. A lot of people want to believe or want things to come out the way they believe that they ought to be. There's a lot of conspiracy theories. There's a lot of people trying to go back to history. I hope we won't go back to as far as if the snake was really a snake when it tried to tell Eve to eat the apple. So who knows, they might think that the serpent wasn't really a serpent. It might have been something else. Could have been a worm or a caterpillar or whatever. But a lot of people are now trying to come up with their own history, or probably because, like in Cebuano, you could probably say daghang way lingaw. So there's so much time in their hands. There's so much information, whether correct or not, available. If you go to the internet, the internet has loads of information that it's so hard to digest what is true or not if you are not really very observant. If you lack the knowledge about basic knowledge, I meet a lot of people who share with me stuff that they find on Facebook. That's including a lot of people who ought to be. They have great degrees. They have a lot of letters after their names, but then sometimes they believe what they read on Facebook. They tell you, oh, I saw this on Facebook. I saw this on social media. This was shared on Twitter. Somebody sent this to me on Messenger. Like even right now, yeah, you have people sending text messages. Oh, this person died of COVID, and I know that particular person. I know probably that person is sick, but then is that person is alive. But then news is already spreading. So a lot of people are not. They don't like really to probably. Uh, they like history to cater to the way to be what they want history to be. So it's just like they like to create or recreate history to suit whatever they want, which was actually done a long time ago by like when Japan after the war they had to rewrite their history books so that the newer generation would believe that the previous generation did something great. So sometimes it's probably a bit too late for these people to try to rewrite what happened in the past. So I think the best way to address this is just to remind them of the incidents that happened before. If they have their own conspiracy theories, then they have to prove it before they they ask people to believe what they're trying to say.
One of the most earth-shattering uh, moments in history in my lifetime was the EDSA revolution, right? This happened
Mm.
in 83, 84, right
80,
after Nino
86.
Aquino Jr. 80,
Yeah,
86, after Nino Aquino was shot in, was it 83, 83, right?
he died in 83, August
83,
21,
and then there was a
1983. Yeah.
revolution in 86, and we were so proud to be Filipinos back then. I remember wearing a shirt, I am proud to be Filipino, and all that
Mhm.
stuff. That was a proud moment in our nation's history, and the kids back then, that we were kids back then, and we were proud of what happened to our country. A lot of
Mhm.
people are trying to sort of change all of that and trying to diminish what happened back then. Can you speak to that, Nimrod? What's going on?
Well, I think the way I see it, a lot of the younger generation from those who were considered as the antagonists during the time are trying to tell the people that no, we were not really that bad. Uh, our family wasn't this bad. This wasn't really the truth. This is the truth. But then it's like they're trying to cover the sins of the past. It's all
The
due to
sins of the
politics.
father.
The sins of the parents. So it's just like, well, they're into politics, so they like to change probably the way people think. But then a lot of people also have a very short memory. So or probably just merely misinformed that they already think, oh, okay, this happened before, but then this also happened. It's actually not. If you get it piecemeal, yeah, okay, they did good in this, they did good in this, but they did bad in this, they did bad in this. No administration has done really all good. No administration has done all bad. No matter how bad the president was, maybe Arab, who was in power just for 3 years, they say he was a bad president, but a lot of people are also saying that he did something good. I'm not an Arab guy. I didn't vote for him. I never voted for him. But then there are also things that he did well, like in the war in Mindanao. He did great. Gloria Arroyo, people are saying that, oh, Gloria, she's so corrupt. But then Gloria Arroyo also did a lot of things. So did Cory. So did Ramos. Even Marcos. I wasn't. I'm not that old. I wasn't born yet when Macapagal was president and all the previous ones before him. So
So,
um,
so they're trying to change, revise history to
for
suit
their
their narrative, right? To
yes,
suit their
yes,
narrative, to sync
yeah.
their narrative, and
Mm.
climb back to the hearts and minds of the Filipino. Uh,
Yes.
Why do you need to do that? Why do you need to revise history? Why can't a politician, for example, run on his or her own merits?
Well, if you're a politician, they always dig up everything that they could dig up against you. Well, we hear a lot of that, especially in the U.S., where even your records as a college or even high school student get exposed. That if you played like something which was considered as racist or anything in the past. So that is now what people are doing. Even in the Philippines, they try to dig everything up. If you go into politics, your life is an open book. So the only way to really sustain or to reach your goal is to change the book that they're opening and try to figure out a way so that the newer generation will think, oh, it wasn't really that bad because this happened. But then, of course, those who were alive during that time, some benefited, so they're happy. But then those who suffered would say that no, it wasn't that good. It was this, it was that. The same thing now. People are complaining against the president. Personally, I believe the president has done a lot of good for this country. I believe in his leadership, and I believe that he's on the right direction. But of course, there are things that I do not agree. Uh, uh, but then I would say that overall, it's good. So I don't know how people would look at this presidency 20, 30 years from now. But for me personally, I'm happy. Then it's the same thing with during the time of Marcos. There were people who were happy with the way he was running things. During the time of Cory, there were people who were happy with Cory. There were people who were not happy with Cory because they lost what they used to have during the Marcos era. So it's just as Arab would say, it's weather lang, panahon lang. So
I hear this a lot from politicians. They say that history will judge me. History will judge us. Meaning to say,
yeah.
once your term is done, once you're already retired, once you're no longer with us, history books will judge you, hopefully, objectively and correctly. Do you think
Mhm.
we have judged our history correctly? Do you think we've judged or written about Ferdinand Marcos, Cory Aquino, on all the previous presidents and all the events that happened to us politically as a nation? Do you think we got it right? Is the history books correct? Or do we need to go back and sort of revise them a little bit?
Well, when I was in college, people were saying that the history book that we were using, the one written by Gregorio Zaide, was flawed. And there were a lot of stuff that were not there. So I think it boils down to research, information. Just like with media, you have to get the correct information. You should have the information that you're writing about. Of course, there is also what you call as the bias. The writer, whether you're the reporter, you're the author of a history book, or whatever, you tend to put your bias into what you're doing. So it happens. It comes out. Like a lot of people are saying, "Oh, Aguinaldo should not be a hero because he had Bonifacio killed," or all those things. Now we see this on social media. This Esquire.ph, they come up with all sorts of short articles about, oh, these are the bad boys who became heroes. And then they have this all sorts of things that are kind of interesting. That when you click it on social media, it comes out what they did. But I see some flaws, based on my personal knowledge. I think there are some information that are inaccurate. But then, of course, I always take it with a grain of salt. I don't just believe what I read. I do a lot of research. I was trained to do research to double check my facts. That's why when I was editor, I was dreaded by the reporters because every time they tell me, "Oh, what's your story?" So I asked them to stand, tell me, and then I kind of don't believe what they're trying to tell me, and I think that they misunderstood their source. So I asked them, "Okay, go check your source." But then while I asked them to go check their source, I am also checking on the source because I have contacts with the source or somebody close to the source. So when they come back to me, I tell them, oh, did you get the story right? And then, okay, okay. Because I also have the same thing that you have. So it's really a matter of checking and double checking your facts. Because in
Um,
research, which is the basis for any writing, for factual writing, for journalism or for like history books, you should just not get a single source to tell you that this is it, and you have to follow me, or you have to believe me because I am the one saying.
do you think it's wise for a society to unearth the history books and revisit it, or should we just leave history alone and move forward? Because I feel that there are still some stories of the past that people are digging up to change
Yeah,
the narrative of
yeah.
what the past was. Do you think it's healthy or useful for a society to constantly dig up the past and revise it?
Well, my favorite channel is History
History.
Channel. I like the History Channel. They have a lot of shows there that they're doing the World War II series. They're doing all these things. Even the lost gold of Yamashita, the Hitler tunnels, and all those stuff. So I think it's good to take a look at what was written in the history books, or take a look at what we know from the reports made about history, and see if there are corroborative information that we could use to really say that this is it. This is the story. Even the Bible, that's something that people are all constantly looking into. Whether the Bible that we are now reading is really indeed the Bible that was there so many years ago. So it is a good practice to really check history, but then to devote so much time on it that we cannot just move on. I think that is also wrong. Maybe well, because I believe that we learn from our past, we learn from our history. So okay, this was the lesson learned during EDSA Revolt. So what should we do so that it won't happen again? We had EDSA 1, we had EDSA 2 during the time of Gloria, and they were saying, oh, there's going to be EDSA 3, EDSA 4. I don't know how many more EDSAs, but I don't think that will happen because of the traffic in EDSA.
So before I get to another topic, Nimrod,
Yeah.
do you still think that Ninoy Aquino Jr. is a national hero or a hero? And should we still have the Benigno Aquino International Airport or NAIA Ninoy Aquino International Airport stay the same, or do we need to change the name to Paliparan something? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. This is my take on Ninoy. Ninoy, well, he wasn't perfect. Just like all our saints, they were not perfect also. Um, but then, what he did when he came home and died, I don't know for what reason did he come back, but then it opened the eyes of the people to go up against the Marcos regime. So during the time, the eyes of the people were opened. People started to fight back. People learned that okay, we have the right to do this. We can do this. Why don't we fight? Why don't we stand up for our rights? So I think that was the best thing that he did. He died. He sacrificed his life, and that's it. Probably that was heroic. Maybe he did a lot of things that wasn't good. Also, he was a young man once, so there were things he did as a young man that were probably should not be acceptable. But then we are not making him into something else. Your heroic deed could be something that it's a one-time thing that you did, and then that's heroic. I think that's it. So more than anything, I think the heroic thing he did was his death had opened the eyes of the people that
So,
we can
so you
fight
think
back.
that Ninoy Aquino is a national hero and he should keep the name of the airport?
I'll leave it to the politicians. I don't care what the airport is called as long as it serves its purpose. But then I think renaming it in this time, I think that's just off. And then you call it like Papa P Airport, paliparang pamhipapawid ng Pilipinas. So,
Uh,
so
let's move
you
on
can
to another
always,
subject matter,
yeah.
Nimrod. One of the game changers of media that totally changed the landscape of media was CNN, the 24-hour news coverage. Ted Turner back then was a visionary. Nobody believed that people would watch news 24/7. Now, this was before Facebook, right? So there was
Yeah.
enormous pressure to cover news and to find news, and sometimes it's difficult when there's nothing going on. They have to look for something exciting, look for an angle that's controversial that people will want to digest. And of course now Facebook, you can cover something which has not yet been completed. Let's just say, for example, this pandemic. I'm very familiar with what's happening with the pandemic in the United States and the way they covered it. Before a solution was done, they already covered the problem. So
Mhm.
so what gets shown in the news is the problem, and just a
Mhm.
few minutes after that was the solution, and
Mhm.
they'll cover that maybe in the next hour. So is there something wrong with the speed in which we cover the news? Because I think there's just so much going on at the same time that I can't sort of digest it for me to understand what's going on.
There's a process in getting the news. First is you have to identify if something is newsworthy. So I used to teach news writing for more than 10 years in St. Teresa's and in the University of the Visayas. So one of the things I would tell my students is that there's a process. You have to identify if something is newsworthy. So how do you identify if it's newsworthy? You should see if there are elements present. So what are these elements? Is there conflict? Is there prominence? Is there a human interest angle? Is there tragedy? And all sorts of things. So these things are all put together, and you try to identify if something is really newsworthy. Is it worth publishing? So because, well, in the traditional media, you had limited space. In the newspapers, you only have so many pages, especially now. If you look at the local dailies, even the national dailies, they're so thin. They're they're down to just less than 20 pages, I think. And there's not much that you can see there. So you're limited in terms of space. On television, you're limited. Like, you know very well of commercials. You're only good for 30 minutes. Jiggy, you're only good for 15. Or Jiggy, your board work is only good for 4 hours. You can go beyond that. You can go over time. When I was with GMA7, our newscast was only good for 15 minutes. So we had to make sure that we fit everything that happened during the day within 15 minutes. So if there's so many big stories, we had to cut them down. We had to chop them down to size just to be able to use the 15 minutes. So that is the disadvantage of the traditional media. The limited airtime, the limited newsprint space. But then here comes the new media. The new media, you have unlimited broadcast time. You could stretch anytime. Why? It's not anymore that expensive to be on air longer, especially if you go nationwide. That's okay. The cost now is not anymore prohibitive. You can do everything via the internet, and then you're good. Like during the 2016 elections, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, 2016.
2016, yeah, and uh,
I think it was 2015.
2016 elections, we did a coverage for my TV. Then when I went out, all we did was we just linked up to the internet and we could do a live broadcast. While other stations, they had to bring their outside broadcast vans, to be able to do a live feed. So this is the advantage now of the new media. You have a lot of time. In the print media, okay, I can show you a few pictures, but if you go to the internet, you can have loads of pictures of one event. So that is the difference. There is now that huge gap in terms of, or the huge difference in terms of airtime, the huge difference in terms of space. You can write as long as you want uh, on the web. You could have so many pages. I doubt if somebody would really read it uh, in total, but then you have so much room to really put in all the details, put in all the pictures, put in all the videos that you could get. So that is different. And also the speed. Sometimes what's happening now is people are just after speed. They see something, they get a video, and then post it on social media. What happens? People would react to the video saying, oh, that guy is bad because he is doing this. But then they didn't see what happened prior to the video.
No context, right?
Yeah. So, and people are making decisions, making comments based on what they see. Because those who are doing it now, they probably didn't think of the impact or what would happen the other side of the story, which makes those who have been trained in journalism different from your ordinary netizen who just likes to post things and then show it to others, share it to others because they like to get the views, like to get the likes, and they like to be first because people always want to know first. We want to know what's going to happen. I think that's the reason also why I stayed too long in media. I go home like late at night, but then I know what's coming out in the newspaper tomorrow. So I always sleep with that in mind that, tomorrow this will be the banner story of the paper. This is what's coming out in the sports section. This is what's coming out in the different sections of the newspaper. So people
we have so
want to
many
be first.
news outfits. Anybody can just post something and consider it. Some people consider it news. And we have so many pseudo news companies that are propping up online.
Yeah.
Is this good for us? I mean, back in the day, back in the 80s, there were only like a few of them. Now we have, I've lost track of how many news brands there are out there. Is this good or bad? What's going on?
Well, both good and bad. Good in the sense that there's a lot of competition. People are really interested to be up to date as to what is happening. Bad in the sense that some people are already careless, that they just want to be first without really getting all the facts straight. And then they already create public opinion. And then afterwards, if they fall flat on their face, they just come up with an apology or just simply shrug it off. It's a good thing that we now have our cyber libel laws, which is actually helping regulate the whole thing. So that is it. It's good, but then there's also something bad about it. It's just like anything that you do, no. But then what's happening now is with so many people wanting to be citizen journalists. I think they should do a little research or a little training to be able to do it right. If you want to be a citizen journalist, if you want to be a part of the media, try to do a little research and not just copy people who are doing it professionally. Yeah, it's true. The media people are not paid so much, but then these are people who went through training. I hope. During my days as newspaper up to now, I try to teach my staff what to do, how to find the right angle, based on my experience, based on what I know in theory and in practice. So I think that's what should be done. Those who want to be in media, they should learn from the people who are willing to teach them. They should not just jump into something and then try to follow them without really thinking if what they're doing is right or wrong. So that's the reason now why we have all these flash reports that are ending up as flushed reports. So because they get burned by the speed that they're doing it. They are reporting something that is not even accurate, or is reporting something that hasn't really been fact checked. So yeah, in the old times we call that corriente. Yeah, the corriente, because you got electrocuted by your story. You had a wrong story, and now they call it fake news.
Yeah, fake news. Speaking of fake news, somebody once said that a lie spoken frequently enough and long enough becomes a truth.
Mhm.
You know, if you have an agenda and you want to spread an idea, for example, whether it's true or not, you can just repeat that idea over and over again, and it becomes a bubble. It becomes a truth in and of
Yeah,
itself. Whether
yeah,
it's true or not, we don't know. Um,
yeah.
what's going on? How do we solve that fake news conundrum?
Well, that has been going on for the longest time, because a lie repeated so many times and spoken, especially by people who are believed to be people who are upright, people who are idolized by other people, can be true. That's a media theory. It's a combination of several theories, but then you could use the reinforcement theory there. If you have a, just like the advertisements, you have people who are popular, like somebody I know, Raymond Serda, who goes by the name of Jiggy Jr. If he talks about a particular product, and then people will think, oh, that should be good because Jiggy eats in that restaurant. Oh, this soap is good because look at this guy. He looks so white. Look at this. Look at the hair. The hair looks so nice. So the shampoo must be good. So we now have social media influencers, people who think that they have followers, and that if they show a particular product, yeah, just like me, I'm wearing my Adidas golf shirt.
You know,
Uh,
Adidas.
and then they tell you, oh, that must be a good brand because this guy is wearing it. So this doesn't really have to be true. Do you think these people who are promoting sardines are eating sardines day in and day out? Do you think these people are these big name stars, or talking
Well,
about laundry
but
soap? Do they
you're talking about a
do
totally
their
you're
laundry?
talking about a totally different you're talking about a totally different thing because that's an ad, that's an advertisement. But
Yeah,
I'm talking about
it's
news.
the
I'm
same
talking.
thing. It's the same
I'm
thing,
what?
because the more you say it, the more you reinforce the belief of that particular person. That person might think, oh, that is really true because I've heard it so many times. It has been spoken so many times. So if you like to believe you're handsome, you can just wake up, oh, I'm so handsome. And you can say that to yourself like 100 times in one day. And then you go out, you're feeling handsome no matter. So it's just the same thing. It's reinforcement, reinforcing your belief. It's the same thing with others. You get somebody popular, you get a mayor, you get a governor, you get the president to say, this should be done. So people will say, oh, the president said that. The parish priest said that. I believe in the parish priest. He is a very credible person for me. So that's what you call the assimilation contrast theory. You follow what somebody you look up to is saying because it's somebody you're looking up to. So if this person you're looking up to is misinformed and tells you a lie and says it over and over again, then you might believe that lie. So it's what's happening. So, but if it's
How do you
somebody,
solve that? How's that? That's not a good thing. Absolutely, right? So
it's not a good
is
thing.
there
But
a
that's
way for us to safeguard us from that? Because it just looks like, because we can now buy ads on social media, right? On Facebook,
yeah.
Instagram, and Twitter. So
Uh-huh.
what you're describing to us here looks like a world wherein if I have money and I want you to believe that I am handsome, I can just pay Facebook to tell everybody that I'm handsome, and voila, I become the most handsome person in the world. So
Yeah.
it looks very dangerous because it looks
It's
like a world where the people who have money wins.
That's a reality. So that's why it's important that you have to make sure
Money.
that, well, aside from having money, you have to make sure that whatever you're very discerning with everything that you come across with. You should be discerning. What makes you buy a particular product? Uh, is it recall of the name? Is it a product you associate with somebody? Or what makes you form a particular opinion? You can see on social media now that every time the administration does something, no matter how big or small, that is not good, then you have this group of people who keep on attacking it. And then suddenly you have this group of people who also attack the group that's attacking them because of a mistake done by the person who they're looking up to in the past. So it's a never ending story. So that's why what's important now is, since this is very hard to regulate, you should have discerning viewers, discerning readers. That's what it is. So that goes back, it goes beyond media. It has to go to our education system. It has to go to our families. It has to be a role as parents to teach our children. Do not just believe what you read or see. You have to learn to do research. You have to learn to do fact checking, because that's the only way you can survive this. It's already a reality that the world is full of lies. It's so hard to know. One major media outfit would be reporting a story from this side, and then another media outfit is reporting the same story from this side, or this side, or this side. So it's the same story, but then that's what you call as the slant. There's an angle that you can pursue to be able to make it suit your agenda. So
Nimrod, Barack Obama was the first internet president of the United States, and I think
mhm,
Rodrigo Duterte is the first internet president of the Philippines. Um,
mhm,
um, Meaning to say, these were leaders that were elected primarily because of the help of the internet,
mhm,
sort of like a movement from the internet.
mhm.
The way we elect, the way presidents get elected back then, how is it different from the way a president becomes popular these days? Back then, would you be able to give us an idea how it all worked, how media worked, and how crucial was media back then for you to get elected, and how is it different from the way we elect presidents now?
Well, it's the same thing. It's still money. Um, the more money you have, the bigger chances of winning, because
Okay.
you can pay everyone. You can pay everyone. If you want to get elected, you pay all your leaders, pay the voters, even pay media. There was a time when there was no limit as to the number of ads
Yeah, yeah.
you can put out in any media outfit. So they're trying to level the playing field. Now people are going to the internet. It's still money because you have to pay for calls. You have to
But
you have to pay for your social media managers.
although
Uh,
I agree with you in that you need money, but the way Barack Obama won was he got donations from individuals, from millions of Americans in
mhm.
small amounts, wherein his opponent
Yeah,
got, the lobby groups, the interest groups, they
yeah,
had millions of dollars in their coffers for
yeah.
campaign. And I think that's what also happened to our current president, Rodrigo Duterte. He initially, it was perceived that he didn't have the funds because he was a
Mhm,
latecomer, and
mhm,
all of these major candidates like Mar Rojas and the others, they were perceived to have been wealthy, and they had the money to mount a campaign. So
mhm,
Duterte used the internet, used Facebook to mount a nationwide campaign, which, because he
mhm.
couldn't afford spots on traditional media. So
Yeah,
it does look like you don't really need a lot of money as much as when there was no new media, when there was no internet, there was no Facebook.
but
You
but
needed
then
real money back then.
yeah, but then if you monetize all the contributions of the people to the Duterte campaign, you would say that there was a lot of money that was poured out, not
Okay.
in the huge sums that came out, but you had ordinary folk going to the print shops, printing all those streamers, printing those posters. that they were distributing. You had people contributing a few pesos just to get those ballers made, to get those stickers made. I know that for a fact because there's a lot of friends, including myself. I have been doing that for the past many elections. People I support, I put in my little amount, what I can afford to help that particular candidate in the elections. And during the 2016 presidential elections, the effort snowballed. So a lot of people found a perfect person that they think, oh, if we support him, if we there's this candidate that is against the traditional candidates, that if we just come out and put a little thing,
so it becomes democratized, right? It becomes more participatory.
Yeah,
Everybody
but then
can participate instead of lobby groups, instead of interest groups who fund a campaign of a president, for example, or a politician. Or ordinary folk can contribute their little amount, and if you put them together, it becomes a huge amount. So it's actually a very good thing, right?
Yeah, let me be a little biblical about this. I'm not a religious scholar, but this is one of the homilies that I could always remember. The parable of the 5 fish and the loaves of bread. If you remember that, when Jesus fed thousands of people. So one of the priests told me that, well, while that boy came out with his fish and few loaves of bread, it wasn't really just, the miracle wasn't that it wasn't that this was spread out to everyone. What happened is, when it came out, when people saw that, oh, this little boy came out, gave his food, everyone who was also hiding food also gave out what they had, what little they had. So with all the little things that they had that were coming out, this allowed all the people present to eat. So it's just like somebody starts something. It's a change agent. We call that in communication theories. Somebody, an initiator, that who would just do something. Okay. Once it starts, people will follow. People will follow. So that is it. That is what happened. So it's the same thing with the campaign. Somebody comes in. Oh, I'll put this in. You know, there's a supplier of tarpaulin printing. I had some streamers made during the campaign period, and then they told me, you know, sir, you're not the first one who came here to have this kind of streamer printed. I had a few other customers who came here. They had one or two made, and then these were ordinary folks, they said, who just came here and wanted to help this particular candidate. So that is the same story. If you go back to the Bible, it's the same thing. Something small from everyone turns out big. So we are able to combat what the lobby groups are doing by a united front.
Democratizes elections. It everybody becomes a part of an election. But why is it, Nimrod, that the world looks very divided now? If you watch Facebook, especially during the elections and months or years after the elections, we were so divided. And you look at what's happening with the world now. You look at what's happening with the United States. They're so divided. So it looks like all of this information, the social media platforms, is tearing us apart. Why is that?
Well, you probably have a lot of friends from different sides of the fence. That's the reason why it looks so divided. So try to pick friends coming from the same fence that you'd like to believe in. No, actually, that's a reality. People are now so opinionated. The new media, our access to information has allowed us to form our opinion, and also gave us the freedom to say our piece. You post a rant, and then somebody clicks the like button, and then, oh, somebody likes what I'm saying. You feel good about it. So it encourages you to do it again. That's reinforcement. The practice of reinforcement theory. Just like say, oh, good job, Jiggy. So keep it up. So every time you see a like, oh, wow, I'd like to do this again because I like to see all those thumbs. Now you have this care button, you have this love button and everything. You have the wow and all sorts of emoticons that's there. So people try to voice out their side because they know that there will be people who would support them. There will be bashers. There will always be bashers. There will be people who wouldn't like you. There will be people who do not understand what you're trying to say. But then it's a reality. But then, of course, you just have to take it like, oh, if I do this, I get so many likes. Like one time I was in an event, somebody comes close to me, oh, I'll stand beside you. Why? Because every time you post a picture on Facebook, you immediately get a lot of likes, and I'd like to be part of the picture where you're in, so that I could also be part of the like. So I probably just have supportive friends. So I'm worth the likes. So that's a reality now. So this is actually this is social, psychological, and everything. Now, even and those in business are also using it for economics. So this is a reality that we have to face. So what's
Well,
important is
it's easier for us to find our tribe and our affinity,
Mhm.
our beliefs. We can just stay in that sort of bubble, and
Yeah.
see that's the thing. It's scary sometimes how people are just in their bubble because they don't have any dissenting opinion because they're groups of friends. The news that they consume are from the ideas that he believes in, the ideologies that he believes in. So he lives in this bubble, and whatever you tell him will be difficult for him. Any dissenting opinion will be construed by him or her as a lie. So you
Mm.
can actually live your life now just stuck in that bubble. You've heard of the flat earth movement, or the flat earthers, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like that is born out of this social media structure wherein
Mhm.
you can sort of just belong to a tribe, and you can just stay there so that because it feels good that you get the likes of your peers and everybody
Mhm.
agrees with you, so you
Uh-huh.
just live in that sort of bubble.
Well, people want to be patted on the back. We all want people to like us. Probably only a few people want others to hate them. So this is what's happening. How many Facebook groups do we belong in? We share the same interest, and then when we do something there because it's a shared interest, people like what we're doing, so we like the particular group. How many
Yeah,
Facebook groups are we not anymore participating in because we cannot just understand what they're doing, so we just leave that particular group or just put it on we don't get the notification if something is happening there. So that is it. It goes back to our need for attention. People want to seek attention. People want to seek compassion. People want recognition for what they're doing. That is why even in the smallest of preschools, they have so many awards being given out to everyone, so that nobody is left behind.
that is the whole business model of Facebook. They're in the business of attention, right? So
Yeah.
the more controversial the story, the better. The more arguments, the more people are involved in a story. The pros and the cons. The more arguments, the more passionate the storytelling is, the better, because you get the attention, you get the likes or
Hmm.
dislikes, but you get the attention. And
Yeah.
Facebook now, I don't know if you've heard, they have experienced a lot of withdrawal from their major advertisers.
Hmm.
Big brands like Coca-Cola and Honda have pulled out because
Hmm.
they're saying that their business model is not correct, is wrong, and all that stuff. Because you're right, we're in the business of attention. That's what
Yeah.
Facebook is. They want people to stay focused on their platform for as long as they can.
Hmm. But then this is reality. Times have evolved. The audience have also evolved. Before, we watch everything on TV. We listen to everything on radio. We get our facts from books. We get it from newspapers, and we we were so limited in terms of our sources. of information. But now, with a click of a button, by just typing in a few keys, like yesterday, we were hearing mass on TV, and then since it was in Cebuano, the priest was talking about a particular prophet. Then we asked each other, what's his name in English? So, and then suddenly my son, Nico, and I came up with the answer because we checked on Google with our respective phones. And we came up
While you
with
were
the
in
answer at
church?
the same time. No, we watched the mass on TV, TV
Okay.
mass. Yeah. So that is happening. Information is just at the tip of your fingers. You watch TV. Oh, how old is this particular actor? And then suddenly you go, oh, this guy is this old. This actress is this old. Oh, we're about the same age. Oh, she's younger than me. Something like that. So now it's so easy to check. You you meet somebody. Oh, this is a familiar name. What do? You go to Facebook. You try to search for that particular name and try to match the name of that name and the face that you probably saw, if that's that particular person. And that's also the reason why a lot of people are now close to those people who they even never really met before, but they have kind of affinity. Like me personally, I have found so many relatives on social media. Uh, I have a lot of cousins from my mother's side of the family who I am now very close with. I used not to be close to them because I don't really spend so much time with them, but with social media, we could get in touch. Even if we don't see each other that often, but then we could chat, we could like the posts of others. It's the same thing with my father's side of the family. So that's just the family. Then you meet all your former classmates, your former crushes, uh, and all those stuff, former colleagues. So you kind of form groups because it is now easy to interact. So it's the business also of connecting. That is the new media. Social media helps us connect with each one. How many people are doing business now while we're on ECQ because of social media? That is because there is connection. You post on Facebook, I have face masks for sale, and then suddenly you're blocked because you're selling something.
We were already around post Facebook, pre
Hmm.
Facebook. I'm sorry, before Facebook. Do you think it's
Friendster.
making us a better human being, Nimrod? This whole business of social media, are we becoming better human beings because of this, or are we getting worse? What are
Y-
your thoughts on
y-
that, Nimrod, in terms of our
yes and no.
humanity?
Yes and no. We're becoming better because there's better technology, easier to check. But then no, also because we kind of get reckless because we rely so much on technology that we forget that we ought to be discerning. We ought to double check facts. So sometimes we just take it as it is and immediately share what we see without really trying to understand if that's real or not. Uh, well, some of the most common stuff that were shared before are like those holidays that are declared, and then without checking the date, we just share a particular news story that comes out, and then it turns out that this was from 2 or 3 years before, right? That has happened so many times because we have lost focus. We are just after speed because we want to be first. We want to share the news right away without checking if the news is correct or not. It's just like chismes. You go to one place, they say, "Oh, in this place, news travels so fast because it travels from mouth to mouth." So that is it.
You know,
Uh,
one of
this
the
is the
reasons
modern
why
day chisme.
the Black Lives Movement is where it is now, because there was a video footage of George Floyd being killed
Yeah.
by a policeman with a a knee on his neck. So there was an actual
Hmm.
footage, a video of it. So it's easy to take videos now of things that are
Hmm.
happening in real time, and you can post it immediately. So the cell phone has become sort of like a weapon, right?
Hmm. Well, in the past, they say that if a dog bites a man, that's not news. But if a man bites a dog, that's news. But then later on, it changed. If a dog bites a man and it is caught on TV, it becomes newsworthy. Why? Because You want to share it. Just right now, everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has a camera handy.
Yeah.
So you can record what is happening and you can share it anytime. You can walk around and see something unusual, take a video of it, even without posting any caption or whatever. People form an opinion based on what they see.
So what is
So
happening now, Nimrod? That everybody is just a mini citizen journalist. It has definitely diminished the role and place of traditional media, right? They're not
well,
as powerful as they once were before
yes,
social media, right?
yes, that is correct. That's why it is very important for those in mainstream media to stick to their function, to set the news straight, report the facts, and avoid bias. So you have to remember that because the moment
See,
that you stray from
so
that role, you
the
open the
problem
floodgates
there,
for this netizens to to come up with all their stories, and then people would not anymore believe you because they see your bias.
the problem there is that traditional media has to compete with the new media, right? They have to
Mm-hmm.
compete with Facebook and all that stuff. So the way they cover a news story, for example, they will have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter in mind. They can't cover the news the way they used to cover the news because the way
Yeah.
people consume news is different now. So what's happening is
Mm-hmm.
traditional media is actually changed by that
That's
perception
correct.
that hey, we've got to talk about this and that because people on social media are talking about. So what once was really, inconsequential news makes it to the headlines of a major news
Mm-hmm.
network because that's what people want on social media, right? So it has definitely changed the way traditional media operates.
Well, that's correct because before when I was with a daily, when I was with a Freeman, I would always monitor social media because if there's something that's happening on social media, it could be newsworthy. So it's just a matter of understanding the events. Like there was once somebody sent me a message about somebody who reportedly committed suicide somewhere. So I had it checked, and it turned out it was a true story. Uh, there were many other incidents that were shared through social media that eventually became stories in mainstream media. But then the thing is, mainstream media must remember its audience. Like now, we have seen a lot of community papers folding up. There's a newspaper in Mindanao just that's publishing its last issue, I think tomorrow, June 30, uh, because it has come to an end. So we should not also forget that while we think of social media as the basis for our audience, we should not always think of it that way. We should remember as to what we are. Like, for example, we have a lot of community journalists, people in the local dailies. So we have to remember what are the stories that what they want to see on mainstream media. Like you should not forget your audience. It goes back to that. So media should not lose focus on that thing because I think a lot of the media now have lost focus because they just see what is popular. They just see that, oh, this is trending, we should do this. But then they forget that this is what they should do in order to get people to follow them, to get people to read them, to consume the material that they are using or they are writing or they are broadcasting. So that is how it should be addressed. Um, we have to live with the fact that social media is there. Social media is something that we cannot live without. What's the first thing you do when you wake up? Check your phone, check your Facebook messages, check
Well,
your.
it is actually very difficult or increasingly more challenging to control your narrative because of the way in which social media is consumed, right?
Mhm.
And the speed in which
Yeah.
it is consumed. And one of the things that I want to ask you, Nimrod, before we wrap this up, is the pandemic. The way that this pandemic is being covered by not just Philippine media but world media. How are we covering this one, Nimrod? And how do you think would we have covered it if this pandemic happened, let's say 30 years ago, would things have been different in terms of our perception of COVID-19?
If we were covering this 30 years ago, we would probably only have like 5,000 cases in the Philippines reported as of now, because that's how slow information was coming out during that time, not the 30,000 plus cases that we already have as of this time. No?
Okay.
So just like during the elections before, I remember when you were following the COMELEC count, it takes like so many number of days before you can come up with an actual count. And then this is the COMELEC number, this is the NUMFREL number. So, but then during the recent elections, you have actual results coming out. Winners are declared like hours after. So that is it. The same with the pandemic. During that time, probably it will take a long time for us to really come up with the figures to get all the interviews.
But it's easier. Let me hold you right there before I forget. So it's easier for you to control the narrative if the news is slow, right? If you're, let's say, a politician, or if you're a corporation, because the news is slow, it's easier for you to do damage control. It's easier for you.
There's a lot of time to react or to
change
anticipate
the narrative, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Because there's a lot of time to anticipate what would happen. So that's the advantage of the past. But now you have to think quick. You have to move quick. So if like for example now there's so much information given to the people. There's so much information given to the media. So it is a matter of having people who really understand what this information that's being given, and they're able to translate this into layman's terms. That is how effective media should, or that is how media should be doing it to become effective in informing the people. Sometimes, sometimes people think, oh, the media must be excellent. They understand everything. But then, as a media practitioner, one thing I always kept in mind is that if there's something I don't know, there's something I don't understand, including the spelling of the name of the person I'm interviewing, I would ask for a way to get it right. So if there's something I don't understand, even if I look stupid in front of my source, I will ask the source, sir or ma'am, can you please explain this in layman's terms so that I would understand it, and it would be easier for me to also relate to the audience what you are trying to tell me, because I cannot be too technical and then just look spaced out on TV what I talk about. So I'd rather say something that I understand. So that's why it's okay to look stupid in front of one person, that look stupid in front of your probably of 3 people watching you, or an audience of thousands or millions. So that is how you should think, and it's how people who are trying to be citizen journalists but must also think. We try to be fast. Yeah, fast is good. Fast is important. But then if we try to be fast to the point of being reckless, to the point that we could destroy something because of speed, there we fail. Or that is the reason why you are not effective. Communication should be the source and the audience. And there should be a smooth line that goes from the source to the audience. What you're trying to say should be understood by the audience, and should not be lost in the middle. Or why? Because you probably failed because you didn't understand what you were trying to talk about. Just like when we go to class and we definitely know that the teacher is telling us something that he or she doesn't really understand, right? Or your audience is so noisy, there's so many things happening in front of them that they cannot concentrate on the message that you are trying to say, right? What happened with alumnus? They say that, oh, they just asked permission to go around with the images of the saints, but then the people around probably didn't understand what it was. So they come out, they get excited. So those are things that you should anticipate also. So it's the same thing with communicating. You have to be clear. They say, oh, why do DJs always have to modulate? Why? You modulate not because you like to look cute on radio, not because you think people will think, oh, this guy looks so handsome. probably looks handsome because he has such a nice voice. But then you try to modulate because you want to sound clearer to your audience, right? That is how how it should be. Of course, I don't know if the people who are doing all this modulation really understand what they're doing now, but that is how it should be. Why people who want to be journalists, I tell them, oh, there's one thing that you should know before you want to become a journalist. And what is that? Command of the language that you're going to use. If you're going to use English, make sure you know how to write in English and you understand English. Because if you do not know how to write in English and you don't understand English, you cannot communicate. So it boils down to the basics. So if you want to be a citizen journalist, if you want to do something good for society, you want to help people, understand what you're doing. Know the language. If you don't know the language, then shut up. If 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 you cannot catch the attention of the people, then don't do it. So also catching their attention is not just catching their attention, but catching their attention so that they get your message. So it's a matter of getting the message across and not just saying that, oh, this is my opinion. So why are people excellent speakers? Because they are able to catch the attention of everyone. Everybody keeps quiet when they talk, or everybody focuses apart their attention. They catch the attention of the people, so they are able to get the message across. But of course, there is that small window that you have to remember. People have a very short attention span, so you have to make sure that you don't talk too much and you just focus on that particular window to be able to send a message. Now I've talked too much, so I probably lost that window.
Wow, but that was actually my final question for you, Nimrod, which you already answered. But I want to ask it anyway. If you forgot to slip in a few more thoughts. What is your message to those who are watching this video and are doing what exactly you're saying? You know, they're becoming citizen journalists. They don't have any formal education. They don't have, they didn't go to school for this. So probably some of them are still in school. What is your message to them if they want to become citizen journalists?
Well, one is understand the language. If you don't understand the language, you're not good at the language, then master it before you try to use it. Second is understand the situation. If you don't understand the situation and you're going to report it, you might be reporting the wrong things. So it's a matter of using your head more than anything else. So that's it.
Use your head.
Actually, I offer.
Advice, right?
I offer some training. People who seek advice, I respond to them. I have my former students, people I meet. They ask me, "Oh, what do I do?" I'm willing to give free advice. But now that you mentioned it, I'll probably think about charging a few pesos, especially with the ECQ.
$2. So Nimrod, I know you have you're also a multimedia sensation. You have a lot of platforms that you use your media skills. Why don't you invite them to take a look at what you're doing on social media in the space?
Well, I've been removing friends on Facebook.
Why is that?
Well, some of them are dead. Some are people who I really don't know. So, and they're friends. So it has to be friends. So if you're not my friend, so you should not be there. Of course, I'm also on Instagram. I have Twitter. I have LinkedIn, and well, I do have www.fullpointcebu.com, which I haven't been updating because I really haven't had the time, or I probably lost my passion for sports writing, especially in this time. And there's nothing happening much in sports, although I do watch Bundesliga on Fox Sports on some nights. It's the only football show that I could watch these days. Then I have my TV show on my TV. It's Full Point, the Cebu Sports Show, and I've changed the format from a magazine to something more of a vlog, because I understand that long shows don't really attract that much, and I want it to be easily shareable on social media. So that's how I mix the traditional with the new media. So that's the way to go. Traditional media, in order to survive, it has to think of social media as a platform to help it advance what it wants to do. So that's my strategy, and I think that's how you should also do it. So, but of course, what's important is use this. Uh,
Thank you so much, Nimrod Quiñones, for sharing to us your broad and wide and long media experience. I hope, I'm sure a lot of our friends, including myself, will learn and have learned a lot from this interview. Thank you so much, Nimrod Quiñones, media man extraordinaire, and of course, he's also the general manager of Alta Vista Golf and Country Club. Thank you so much, Nimrod.
okay, thank you, Jiggy.
You stay safe.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you so much, Nimrod Quiñones, for being a part of the show. Thank you so much. This show is brought to you by our good friends from Organic Acai. Thank you so much. If you want to live a healthy lifestyle, make sure you exercise, okay? Do 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Get the proper nutrition, have a healthy diet, and of course, take supplements. And I think one of the best supplements in the market today is Organic Acai. Thank you so much. You guys stay safe now, okay?